Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going to look at something you probably see 100 times a day, maybe 1,000 times a day, without ever really thinking about what it is.
Not really thinking, no.
We are talking about photography, but we aren't talking about filters or lighting or, how to take the perfect selfie.
No, definitely not. We are going way, way deeper than the aesthetics of Instagram.
We're going to ask a much more fundamental, almost philosophical question. When you look at a photograph, whether it's on a museum wall, printed in a newspaper, or just scrolling past your thumb on a screen,
Hmm.
what are you actually looking at?
What is that object, that thing?
Is it just a piece of paper? Is it just a digital file? A work of art? Or, and this is the big question for today, is it a contract?
It is a fascinating question, and to answer it, we are going to dive into a truly dense, radical, and I think incredibly important piece of work by Ariella Azoulay called The Civil Contract of Photography.
This book is heavy in the best possible way. It completely flips the script on how we consume images. Azoulay basically argues that photography isn't just about the picture itself. It's an event.
Right, an event, not a static thing.
It's a political space. And she argues that every time you look at a photo, you are entering into a civil contract with the person in the picture and the person who took it.
Exactly. And the stakes here are incredibly high. Azoulay isn't just writing about art theory for the sake of it. I mean, she's moving from the French Revolution all the way to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and she's using photography to rethink what it actually means to be a citizen.
Right, and that's the mission for this deep dive. We want to understand how photography creates this space where people who might be ignored by the state, people who are oppressed, or non-citizens or refugees, can still claim their rights.
Glad they can make a claim, yeah.
They can still demand to be seen, even if they don't have a passport or a vote.
It's about how photography allows people to bypass the state entirely and create a bond directly with us, the spectators.
Yeah.
It posits that there is a citizenship of photography that supersedes the citizenship of a nation.
So we've got a massive amount to unpack here. We're going to talk about the difference between just looking at a photo and actually watching a photo, which is a really cool distinction she makes.
It's a game changer.
We're going to talk about impaired citizenship, and we're going to look at some really specific, powerful examples from history. But I want to start where Azoulay starts, which is with her own personal story, because she has this fascinating origin story about how she realized photographs could lie, or at least how our brains can lie about photographs.
It is a striking beginning to such a theoretical book. It's very personal. She takes us back to June 1967, the Six-Day War. She was just a child, 5 years old, living in the Israeli coastal city of Netanya.
And it's not an image she remembers, right? It's a feeling.
It's a feeling, a sound. She describes this very visceral memory. She remembers the drone of planes overhead. She remembers the siren wailing.
And the banister, right? That detail really stuck with me.
Yes, the banister. She recalls trying to slide down the banister to get to safety in the shelter, but the banister was physically trembling from the vibrations of the bombing outside.
Wow.
She says she remembers her teeth rattling in her head. She describes it as a continuous snapshot, her body sliding down into the dark, arms wide open. That is her only visual memory of the war. Everything else she knows about it came from stories later on.
Which is wild because the Six-Day War is such a heavily documented event in Israeli history. There are archives full of images, but for her it was just this one sensory flash.
It's a bodily memory, not a visual one.
But then she talks about what happened after the war. Her father owned a shop, right?
He did. And in the aftermath, he sold what were called victory albums. These were photo albums celebrating the Israeli victory. And Azoulay writes that for years, she viewed this war with pride. She consumed these images. She thought of it as an illustrious war.
A heroic war.
Yes. But later, as she grew up and developed a critical eye, she realized that those albums were documenting a conquest. They were documenting the dispossession of other people's lives, packaged as a celebratory product.
And this leads to this concept she introduces called the planted picture. This really stuck with me because I think we all have this even if we don't realize it.
No, absolutely.
It's the idea that society, or your parents, or your education, can plant an image in your head that isn't real, but it feels real.
It's a phantom image. It constructs your reality before you even see the world. She gives this very specific, slightly uncomfortable example from her childhood to illustrate this.
This is the one about the beach.
The beach, yes. She remembers her mother refusing to go to the beach on Fridays. And her mother's reasoning was, that's the day the Arabs go. And she would mutter this specific detail. They go in with their clothes on.
Which created this terrifying image in Azoulay's 5-year-old mind.
Exactly, a completely fabricated image. She says she carried this image in her head of Arabs struggling in the sea, half submerged, weighed down by heavy, wet clothes, a dark, struggling mass.
She describes it so vividly.
She says, I remember this image as if it were a photograph I actually saw, but she never saw it. It was planted there by her mother's words, by the prejudice of the time.
That is so relatable, though. Not that specific example necessarily, but the idea that we have these visual biases in our heads that we think are reality. We visualize the other based on stories we've been told.
And it's so powerful because it's pre-verbal almost. It's just an image that lives in your head.
But for Azoulay, the shift happened when she started seeing actual photographs.
Real photographs replaced the phantom ones. She describes seeing photos in the newspaper during the First Intifada. Specifically, a photo of a girl having her hair pulled by soldiers and another of a young boy tied up on the ground.
Not an abstract mass of people in the sea.
No, these black and white photos in the newspaper shattered that planted picture. They forced her to look at the Palestinians not as this abstract, scary other, but as individuals suffering specific injuries at the hands of the state she belonged to.
And that realization seems to be the spark for this whole book. She realized that traditional art criticism, the way we usually talk about photos, was failing us. You have famous critics like Susan Sontag or Jean Baudrillard who basically said, we see too many images of suffering, we're overloaded.
We're numb, the images don't mean anything anymore.
Right. Compassion fatigue.
Exactly, that concept of image fatigue. It's a very popular idea in media studies, that we are flooded with misery, so we just tune out. Azoulay completely rejects that.
She really pushes back on it hard.
She argues that saying we are overloaded is just an excuse to stop looking. It's a way to absolve ourselves of responsibility. She says we have to stop thinking of the photograph as just an aesthetic object or a piece of evidence that something happened.
So if it's not just a picture, and it's not just art, and we aren't allowed to be fatigued by it, what is it?
It's a pact. It is a political space. She calls it the civil contract, and this contract involves 3 parties.
Okay, let's break this down.
You have the photographer, obviously, the person operating the machine.
Yeah.
You have the photographed person, the subject, and you have the spectator. That's us.
And the government? The state, where do they fit in?
That's the key. They don't. The state is not the mediator. Azoulay argues that the civil contract of photography is a relationship that evades the control of the sovereign power.
So it happens outside of official power structures.
Completely. No single person owns the meaning of a photo. The state can't dictate what it means. The photographer can't even fully dictate what it means. It's this dynamic, ongoing negotiation between those 3 parties.
I love that idea. It's like once the photo is out there, it belongs to the citizenry. It creates this space where we can talk to each other directly. But to understand why this is so radical, we have to go back in history. We have to look at where our ideas of citizenship actually come from. And Azoulay takes us all the way back to 1789, the French Revolution.
The birth of modern citizenship. She analyzes the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Now, listen to that title closely. Rights of Man and of the Citizen.
It sounds like they're saying the same thing twice, like man and citizen are synonyms. I always just glossed over that.
You would think so. Most people do. But Azoulay points out a critical split here. The Declaration created a distinction. On one hand, you have man, a being with natural rights, born free, simple existence.
A biological life, a human being.
Biological life, exactly. On the other hand, you have the citizen, a member of the political community with specific political rights, like voting or holding office.
And the problem is that not every man gets to be a citizen.
Precisely. This split created a residue. It created a whole group of people who are governed by the state. They are present. They are subject to the laws. They can be arrested. But they are not citizens. They have no political representation.
So in 1789, who are we talking about?
We're talking about women, slaves, the poor, foreigners. They were the invisible governed. They were spoken for but couldn't speak.
And Azoulay brings up this incredible historical figure, Olympe de Gouges, who called this out immediately. I hadn't heard much about her before this, but she sounds like a powerhouse.
Olympe de Gouges is absolutely a hero of this narrative. In 1791, just 2 years after the original, she wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Woman and the Female Citizen.
She just rewrote it.
She basically rewrote it line for line to show exactly who is being left out. She exposed that the universal man actually just meant Well, man, it excluded half the population.
And she talked about this idea of the sexual contract, right? That women weren't just left out, they were actively subordinated.
Yes, that's a key term. Women were abandoned to the sexual contract, meaning they were subordinated to fathers and husbands. Their sphere was the private home, not the public square. Their grievances were considered domestic issues, not political ones.
Things that happen behind closed doors.
Exactly. And Degouche argued for the right of the governed to talk back to power. She has this famous argument about the right of a woman to speak the truth about her own body.
Is this the part about the illegitimate child?
It is. She argued for the right of a woman to look a man in the eye and say, "I am the mother of a child which belongs to you." Now think about the context of the 18th century. That was revolutionary.
That's a public accusation.
It challenged the public-private divide. It took a private shame, an illegitimate child, or perhaps a waif, and turned it into a public political statement. It was a demand for recognition.
So, connecting this back to photography, Azoulay is saying that photography is the modern version of saying, I am the mother of a child which belongs to you.
Exactly. It's the modern tool for that kind of speech. Photography becomes the tool for flawed citizens, for women, for refugees, for non-citizens, to present their grievances when the state refuses to hear them.
When the courts won't listen.
When the law ignores you, you can use the camera to make your claim directly to the public. You can say, I exist, this injury exists, and you have to look at it.
That is such a powerful connection. It's like the camera gives you a voice when the ballot box doesn't.
Yeah.
And Azoulay gives us a concrete example of this from the 19th century, the story of Jonathan Walker. This story is intense.
It is a harrowing story, but it perfectly illustrates the civil contract in action. So Jonathan Walker was a man tried in Florida in 1845. He was a sea captain. His crime, helping 7 slaves escape.
So from an abolitionist perspective, a hero. From the state's perspective, a criminal.
A criminal who stole property. He was caught and he was branded.
Literally branded, like cattle.
Literally branded. As part of his punishment, the court ordered that his hand be branded with the letters SS.
Which stood for slave stealer.
Right. It was meant to be a mark of eternal shame. A permanent criminal record burned into his flesh so that everyone who shook his hand would know he was a thief of property.
But he doesn't hide it. That's the key part of the story.
That's where the civil contract comes in. Walker didn't hide his hand. He didn't wear a glove to cover the shame. He went to a photography studio, Southworth and Hawes in Boston, and he had a daguerreotype taken of his branded palm.
He zoomed in on the shame. He made it the subject.
He did. He publicized it. And by circulating that image, the meaning of the brand changed. The public, the spectators, specifically the abolitionists in the North, looked at that photo and they didn't see slave stealer.
They saw something else entirely.
They reinterpreted the SS to mean slave savior.
Wow. So he basically hijacked the state's punishment. The state said, you are a criminal, and he used photography to say to the public, no, look at this. The state is the criminal for doing this to me.
Precisely. Walker and the photographers created a new community. They bypassed the legal system of Florida and appealed to a virtual community of citizens who believed in abolition.
It's a counter-speech.
It's a perfect example. It proves Azoulay's point. The civil contract allows the governed, the photographer, the subject, and the spectator to conspire together against the ruling power. They created their own justice through the image.
That's amazing. It really shows that photography isn't just passive. It's an active rebellion. But now we have to fast forward. We have to take this theory and apply it to the situation that drives a lot of Azoulay's work, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Right.
This is where the rubber meets the road and where her theories get really tested.
This is the core of her analysis. She views Palestinians in the occupied territories as the ultimate modern example of non-citizens.
The residue we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They are governed by the Israeli state. The state controls their movement, their economy, their borders, the air above them, but they are excluded from the political community. They cannot vote. They have no representation in the body that governs them.
And she introduces this concept that I think is so crucial for understanding modern conflict. She talks about the verge of catastrophe.
Yes. This is a very subtle but important distinction. Usually when we think of catastrophe or disaster, we think of an explosion, an earthquake, 9/11.
Something sudden that breaks time.
Right. It creates an emergency, the sirens go off, the ambulances come, the news crews rush in. It's an event.
But the verge's catastrophe is different.
The verge of catastrophe is a chronic state. It's when the disaster is part of the daily routine. Azoulay argues that for the non-citizen, the catastrophe is postponed. It's made invisible because it never quite explodes into a single news-breaking event. It's just life.
It's the daily grind of occupation, the daily uncertainty.
The slow violence of it all.
And she has a critique of humanitarian aid here too, right?
Mhm.
Which surprised me. Usually we think of humanitarian aid as the good guys. We see the trucks with the logos and think, okay, help is here.
It's a nuanced critique. It's not that she's against aid, but she's critical of how it functions. She argues that humanitarization, the constant presence of aid organizations, and even the army acting in a humanitarian capacity can actually help maintain this state of verge.
How does that work?
By treating the symptoms, making sure people have just enough food, just enough medical care to survive, they prevent the situation from exploding into visibility. They maintain life at a bare minimum.
So it keeps the catastrophe on the verge, rather than allowing it to become an emergency claim that demands a political solution.
Exactly. It normalizes the abnormal. It creates a ceiling on how bad things get, but also a floor that you can't rise above. It makes the intolerable tolerable enough to continue. It manages the population rather than solving the political problem.
And the symbol of this chronic disaster is the checkpoint. Azoulay describes the checkpoint not just as a border, but as a zone of exception.
Right. She points out that the border isn't a line on a map. For a Palestinian, the border is a spot. It's wherever they stand when a soldier stops them. It moves with them. And in that spot, the law is suspended.
She calls the soldier a petty sovereign. I love that term, even though it's terrifying.
The petty sovereign. It's perfect. It means the soldier at the checkpoint, often a young conscript, 18, 19 years old, effectively becomes the king. He is the law.
His word is final.
His decisions are arbitrary. He can decide if a woman is pregnant enough to go to the hospital. He can decide if a dialysis patient can pass. It depends on his mood, his luck, some vague intelligence report, or just whether he's having a bad day. The regular rules of citizenship predictability, rights, don't apply.
And this is where photography comes back in. Because Azoulay analyzes photos taken at these checkpoints, or in these zones, to show us what this non-citizenship looks like.
Yes, to make it visible.
There's one photo she mentions by Alex Levac from 2000 in Hebron. Can you describe that one for our listeners?
It's a difficult image. It shows a Palestinian man lying wounded on the road. He's been shot in the leg. And standing over him is an Israeli soldier. But the soldier isn't helping him, and he isn't arresting him. He's just standing there.
What's his posture like?
Casually holding his rifle. He looks almost bored, or at least indifferent. The wounded man is an obstacle, a piece of the landscape.
And the wounded man.
The wounded man is trying to lift his head. He's gesturing with his hands. Azoulay interprets this gesture as an attempt to negotiate. Even lying there, bleeding, in a zone where he has no rights, he is trying to reclaim his standing as a human.
He's making an appeal.
He is trying to appeal to the soldier, or perhaps to the camera, to recognize him. It's a desperate attempt to activate the civil contract when the state contract has failed him. He is speaking visually.
There's another photo she discusses by Mekhi Kratzman called Migrant Worker. It's a photo of a dead body, and this one, it hits differently.
Yes, a dead body lying exposed on the ground. And the grievance here, the reason this photo matters, is the exposure. In most societies, there is a basic respect for the dead. You cover the body, you shield it from the public gaze.
It's a basic human dignity.
But here, the body is abandoned. Azoulay argues that the photographer's duty here was to document this abandonment. The photo serves as evidence that this person was stripped of the right to dignity, even in death.
It's almost like the photo itself becomes the shroud. Since the state didn't cover him, the photographer covers him by capturing the injustice of his exposure.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The photograph insists that this person matters, even when the reality on the ground says they don't.
This brings us to a really key distinction Azoulay makes. She talks about the difference between looking at a photo and watching a photo, and she prefers watching. Why? What is the functional difference?
Looking can be passive. It can be aesthetic. You look at a photo and say, oh, good composition, or oh, that's sad, and then you move on.
It's a consumer act. You consume the image and you're done.
Exactly. But watching is active. Think about how we watch a movie. We reconstruct the timeline. We think about what happened before and what happens after. We analyze the character's motivations.
So to watch a still photo means to add time back into it, to unfreeze it.
Yes, you have to reconstruct the photographic situation. You have to ask, why was this taken? Who is the photographer? What are the power dynamics here? What is the subject asking of me? It transforms the photo from a static object into a scene of action.
You aren't just seeing a frozen moment. You are seeing a relationship.
An ongoing relationship that you've just entered.
It makes me think of ownership, because if we are all participating in this, the photographer, the subject, the spectator, then who actually owns the photo? Legally, usually the photographer owns the rights, right?
Legally, yes. The person who holds the means of production, the camera, owns the image, but Azoulay argues that this is fundamentally wrong.
She throws that whole idea out.
Completely. She argues that no one owns a photo. A photo is a deposit. It belongs to the citizenry. It is a shared resource.
She has a great example of this involving an emperor, Napoleon III. This story is kind of hilarious in a historical way.
It is a classic case of the camera misbehaving. In 1849, Napoleon III wanted a portrait of his young son. So they go to a studio. The prince is put on a pony. It's all very staged, meant to look regal and powerful.
A piece of state propaganda, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But in the final photo on the edge of the frame, you can see the emperor's profile. He's just lurking there. And you can see an assistant's hand holding the horse so the kid doesn't fall off.
Oops.
Exactly. The camera captured more than the sovereign intended. It stole the emperor's image. And a court case actually arose later about it. But the point Azoulay makes is that the camera has a mind of its own. It captures things that escape the control of the powerful. The emperor couldn't control the frame. The image escaped him.
So the camera is inherently a bit rebellious. It sees what it wants to see. But on the flip side, you have the famous migrant mother photo by Dorothea Lange. Everyone knows this photo, the Depression era, the woman with the worried face.
The kids hiding behind her. It's iconic, perhaps the most famous American photograph.
But the story behind it is much more complicated.
It is. Years later, the subject, Florence Owens Thompson, was actually found. And she was angry. She felt exploited. She said, I can't get a penny out of it. She felt that Lange had taken her image and built a career on it while she stayed poor and struggled.
So how does Azoulay handle that? Does she say the photographer stole the image? Because it sounds like she did.
She acknowledges the exploitation. She doesn't deny it, but she twists it in a really interesting way. She argues that the subject, Florence, is an owner of the photo.
So they're co-owners.
In a sense.
Yeah.
She says that when we become citizens of photography, we renounce the exclusive right to our own image, but only on the condition that we can use the images of others to understand the world.
Wait, unpack that. That sounds complicated. It sounds like a trade.
Basically, it is a trade-off. It's a social contract. I allow my picture to be taken, even if I'm vulnerable, because I trust that the citizenry of photography will use images to demand justice for people like me.
So Florence Owens Thompson gave her image, perhaps unwillingly, but that image became a tool for people to understand the Great Depression and demand better policies.
Right. It's a mutual exchange, in theory. It's not theft. It's a contribution to a collective archive of grievances.
But that only works if the audience actually does something.
Right.
If the spectators hold up their end of the bargain.
Precisely. And that puts all the responsibility on us. Azoulay says the spectator has a duty. When the state fails to protect people, like the Palestinians at the checkpoint or the migrant mother, the state has broken its contract, so the spectator has to step in. We must use the photograph to recognize the subject's citizenship.
So we aren't just looking at victims to feel pity. She's very critical of pity.
No. Pity maintains distance. Pity says, poor you, I'm glad I'm not you. Pity is about the spectator's feelings. Azoulay wants us to look at them as fellow citizens.
Even if they live thousands of miles away and have a different passport.
Yes. We are looking at members of the citizenry of photography. And our job is to watch the photo, reconstruct the injustice, and demand that the civil contract be honored.
It's like, if you see a photo of someone being mistreated, you aren't just an audience member, you are a witness. And by seeing it, you are signing the contract. You're saying, I see you, you're part of my community, and this is not okay.
Precisely. The photograph becomes a proof of citizenship that the state cannot confiscate.
This is such a radical way to look at the world. It really takes the power away from the government and puts it back in the hands of, well, anyone with a camera and anyone with eyes.
It democratizes the power of recognition.
It's deeply empowering, but also demanding. It means we can't just scroll past images of disaster. We have to engage with them. We have to allow them to interrupt us.
It's a heavy responsibility.
So let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot. We've gone from the French Revolution and Olympe de Gouges to the branded hand of Jonathan Walker to the checkpoints in the West Bank. What is the big takeaway here? If listeners remember one thing from Azoulay's work, what should it be?
The takeaway is that the civil contract of photography is a bond between the governed that the state cannot control. It's a way for us to govern ourselves, to relate to one another across borders and walls.
It's a parallel form of citizenship.
It suggests that even if you are stripped of every legal right you still have the right to be seen and the right to address others through the image.
And there's a paradox here, too.
Yes, photography involves violence. Taking a picture is aggressive, it turns a person into an object, it freezes them. But Azoulay argues it is also a tool for rehabilitation. It restores citizenship to those who have lost it.
So it's a poison and a cure at the same time.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that idea. Can a camera be more powerful than a constitution?
That is the provocative thought I'd leave us with. In a world where the state decides who counts, who gets a passport, who gets rights, who gets past the checkpoint, the state seems all-powerful, but the camera challenges that monopoly.
So
What you're saying is,
if you are stripped of your passport, if you're stripped of your rights, your photograph might become your last valid ID card.
yeah,
It's the only document that the world is forced to recognize.
that is something I'm going to be thinking about the next time I see a photo on the news. I'm not just looking at a picture, I'm signing a contract.
We all are.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.